Hello, boys and girls. I'm excited about teaching you this next few weeks. We're going to study something that I believe is really important. Of course, the Bible is always important, but this study is called 4,000 Years in 13 Weeks. So if we have about 13 weeks, and we don't know, but if we have about 13 weeks, we're going to travel 4,000 miles. Isn't that a long distance? It is, isn't it? Well, we get the number 4,000 because from the time of creation until the beginning of the Christian age, when Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, in that era, the Christian age, there were 4,000 years. Scientists tell us that it was millions and millions. No, it was 4,000 years, and we're going to find out that one book of the Bible had many of those years in it, and that's surprising. Okay, 4,000 years in 13 weeks. What we're going to do is I want you to imagine a red ribbon, and it's running all the way from the first book of the Bible to the last book. And that red ribbon is the blood of Christ. And what we'll see is that Jesus and his sacrifice and God giving his son, remember this passage in John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. Remember? And so he gave his son, and that thread, that promise that God was going to do that, started in Genesis, and it came all the way through the Old Testament, and then it became real in the New. So in the Old Testament, Jesus was concealed, that is hidden, but when he was born in Bethlehem, he was revealed. So in the Old Testament, he was concealed, hidden, and just told about things that that might happen, that were going to happen, not might, but were going to happen. And the prophets, many of the prophets talked about it. But then in the New Testament, when he became flesh and blood, became a man, he was Jesus revealed. In other words, uncovered, no longer hidden. Everybody could see him. And that's incredible. That's amazing. So let's keep that thought in mind. And as we start, we want to think in a broad sense, like an overview, that there were 3 unique periods of time. And you'll have that chart with you in your packet, I hope. It looks something like this right here. It talks about the patriarchal, Mosaical, and Christian age, and you'll see, Adam, and then over here Moses, and then over here Christ. So these first 2 circles that's the Old Testament right here, leading up to the cross, and that's where Jesus comes and establishes the Christian age. So the Mosaic, the patriarchal age, that's the fathers. A patriarch was a father, and that was when God spoke to fathers of households. He didn't speak through Moses. Moses didn't come till much later, but he spoke to fathers like Noah and Abraham and Isaac and many, many more that we'll talk about. But then when they left Egypt, and Moses was their leader, and they went into the wilderness, God gave them a law, and that's when it became the Mosaic age. The Moses law took care of that, and that lasted for the people until Jesus came. And so that's the Old Testament right here, right there, and that's 4,000 years. Now, the Old Testament had approximately 32 writers, and then it's kind of broken down into parts. There are 5 books of law, and there are 12 books of history that just tell us the history of the Jewish nation. There are 5 books of poetry, and there are 17 books of prophecy. Of those 17, there are 5 major prophets and 12 minor prophets. And the only reason they're called major is because they're long books. They're long prophet books. And the minor books are short. So they're both equally important, but that's how they categorize those. So getting into the book Genesis, the beginning of the Bible, Genesis, the word means beginning. Genesis is beginning because it contains the beginning of everything, doesn't it? The beginning of time, beginning of the world, beginning of men and women, the beginning of sin, the beginning of salvation. When we get to Genesis 3:15, which is early, that's just the 3rd chapter, when the serpent comes into the garden and speaks to Adam and Eve. Now remind you, Adam and Eve are sinless. They've not committed any sin at that point. They've just enjoyed the garden. In fact, they walk with God in the cool of the evening. Can you imagine that? Walking with God in the garden. That's the kind of relationship they had with God. Well, they had that relationship. God told them not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And they knew that. In fact, when the serpent came up to Eve, she was standing near that tree of knowledge that they weren't supposed to eat the fruit of. And the serpent said, it's really Satan inside the serpent. The serpent said, has God told you not to eat of the fruit? And she told the law, the command. God doesn't want us to eat. If we eat it, we'll surely die. And so she knew the law. Evidently, Adam had told her the law because previously God had just told Adam. But evidently, Adam told her the command, and she knew it. But the serpent tempted her with several things. He said, "Oh, it looks good. It looks good. It's pretty." And then he said, "Oh, it tastes good too." And then he said, "Oh, it's going to make you wise. You're going to be like God. God is wise, and you're going to be like him." Well, Eve liked all of those things. She wanted to be like God. She wanted to taste that delicious fruit, and she too thought it was very pretty, a very pretty fruit. So she didn't listen to God. She listened to the serpent, and she took a bite. And then, worse yet, she gave it to her husband, who was with her. He was standing right there with her. He could have stopped her, but he did not. Shame on Adam. And Adam took it, and what did he do? He took a bite of it. Can you believe that? He and she took a bite, and from that moment, their eyes were opened, and they saw things differently, and they realized that they weren't sinless. They weren't sinless anymore, and they weren't innocent anymore, and they went to hide, and to hide from God, and God finally found them and came to them and said, "Why are you hiding? And did you eat the fruit that you were told not to eat?" And yes, they did. They said they ate it. Well, God punished them. He started right then, and he delivered the punishment. He told the woman that she was going to suffer when she gave birth to children, and that she was going to be ruled. Her husband was going to rule over her. She would not have fair reign anymore. She was not supposed to be in a leadership position from the beginning. Adam was. Adam was supposed to be the leader. But now God says, for sure, you're not going to be in any leadership role. And then to Adam, he said, you're going to toil on the earth. You're going to have to dig in the earth to make your herbs, to grow your gardens, and the thorns and the thistles and all those horrible things are going to come up and choke them, and you're going to have to fight them. And he said, God said, it's going to be a struggle now, but you're going to have to do that by the sweat of your brow now. And he said, you know, you will eventually die, because they had to be cast out of the garden, and they couldn't eat of the tree of life. So that from that point on, they began to get older and older and older, and they eventually died. If they had stayed in the garden and kept that law, then they could have eaten that fruit of the tree of life, and they could have lived forever and enjoyed that beautiful relationship with God. But instead, they were cast out. But before he cast them out, he spoke to the serpent too, and who was really Satan. And he said, you serpent, you're going to be crawling on your belly in the dust from now on. Of course, serpents, snakes do that, don't they? But to Satan, who was in that serpent, he said, one day, and this is the great promise, one day you're going to really hurt, physically hurt the seed, the child of a woman. And that child is going to really suffer because of what you've done to him. But then that child is going to come right back, and he is going to like stomp your head and kill you and crush you. That was a prophecy of what was going to happen. Satan at the cross was going to hurt Jesus terribly with that crucifixion. But what was Jesus going to do when he raised up from the dead, when God resurrected him? He was going to deal Satan a blow, a crushing blow. So that was the first mention of Jesus in the Old Testament. And that was a beautiful promise that God was going to send a Savior. And one day that would give us salvation. So that's where we get that red ribbon starting right there. Well, the salvation. Sorry about that. Phone's ringing. Can't get it shut off. So the next sheet I want you to look at is that scarlet thread sheet. And you'll notice that some of these things might be above your head, but some of them are not. The first one is Genesis 3:15. Genesis 12 is when God came to Abraham, and God said that all the nations would be blessed through your children. And Jesus came from Abraham. Jesus was one of his descendants. And Jesus came to bless all the nations of the earth, didn't he? And then in Genesis 22, when Abraham was told by God to offer Isaac his son, that is an image of exactly what God did. God told Abraham to offer Isaac, his only son, only one-of-a-kind son, and he didn't allow Abraham to go through with it. He held his hand before he struck him, and he didn't have to kill him, which was wonderful. But when it came down to, many, many years later, when Jesus was living, God offered his only one-of-a-kind son, and he really was put to death. And that's an image of just what was going to happen, and that God was going to bring salvation through that. There are many, many other things that are on this, but anyway, you'll see that in just about every book of the Bible, there's something about Jesus being coming, and about him bringing salvation not just to the Jews but to the Gentiles too. So I wanted to leave that with you and let you look over it and maybe talk to your mom and dad about it, and have some discussion about it with them. Then let's see, what do we have next? I think I told you that Genesis means beginning. It was written by Moses. It covers, now this is the kicker, it covers, of that 4,000 years, it covers 2,500. That's over half of that 4,000. Isn't that amazing? The first book of the Bible covers that much. And then it begins with creation. Remember the first verses, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And so that's the very first thing. And by the way, did you know there's a book in the New Testament that starts with those very same words? The very same. That book is the book of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word created. And in the beginning, that in the beginning is just a key thing. And in John, he's saying that the Word is Christ. So in the beginning, Jesus created. And, you know, we don't often think about Jesus as being God, but he was. He was God. He is God. Now, the outline of the chapters, I think I gave you a sheet that told about that. And so we'll go through that pretty quickly. Chapters 1 and 2 are about creation. Chapter 3 is about the fall of man. That's when Satan came and tempted Eve, and when Adam and Eve fell into sin and they were cast out of the garden. Chapter 4 is about Cain and Abel. Remember, they were the first sons of Adam and Eve, and Abel's offering was pleasing to God. He offered a sheep, something of his flock, and Cain did not. He offered the fruit of the ground. And some say that he just kind of picked up the rotten fruit that was laying on the ground. I mean, that's the image that at least I have of that, and that he offered that to God. He certainly didn't give the best to God, and Abel gave the best. Well, God honored Abel for that. And Cain, oh boy, he got jealous and mad at his brother. And God came to him, and God said, watch out, because sin is really crouching, and sin is going to get you good if you keep staying mean and jealous of your brother. Well, Cain didn't pay attention, and he did the most horrible thing in the world. He killed his brother, Abel. And God made him, he punished him. He put a mark on him and sent him far, far away. And so that left Adam and Eve without children until they had another child, and that child was Seth. And Seth became the child that Jesus eventually came through. Okay, now chapter 5, it talks about the generations from Adam to Noah. And then chapters 6 through 9, that's the story of Noah. And all of us know the story of Noah, don't we? How that God came to him, told him to build an ark. The reason was because there was sin and wickedness all over the earth. The only righteous people, only good people on the earth was Noah and his family, his wife and his 3 sons and their wives. And those were the only people that God was going to save. And God saved them by having him build an ark. And do you know, that ark was so big. It had multiple stories, levels in it. It had 1 window and 1 door. That's hard to imagine, but it did. And some say that window stretched all the way around the top, that it was an open window all the way around the top. I don't know that, but it makes sense. But then also, the it rained for 40 days and 40 nights until the entire earth was covered, and Noah. I forgot to say, it took him 100 years to build the ark. Noah was quite old by the time he died, but it took 100 years of his life to just build the ark. It was that big and that massive. So they stayed on in the ark for a long time. He sent out birds to see if they would land and they would come back, and then he finally sent a dove out. The dove came back and it had a branch in its mouth. So Noah knew that things were growing out there, that the water had gone down. So he sent the dove out again, and the dove did not come back. So he knew that the water had gone down. And the boat, the big ark, rested on a mountain, and that mountain was Ararat. And it's a place that's just now, it's way up in the mountains and in a region that nobody can get to because it's so high, one of the high mountains. So Noah's sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and all of the nations of the earth come from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, chapter 10 is about all the generations of Noah. And then chapter 11 is about the Tower of Babel. And remember that, God told the people after Noah, he said to go and fill the earth and prosper and don't in other words, don't get in clusters. Go and spread out and fill the earth and enjoy the earth. But they didn't want to do that. They didn't listen to God. They stayed in one place, in one town, and they became really proud. And they decided they were going to build a tower all the way up to heaven. And then I believe they thought that they could know what God was doing. And they could know what he was thinking. So they began building that tower, and God saw that, and he said, how foolish, they can't do that. And he punished them by confusing their languages. Up to that time, there had only been one language. But now, he made everybody have different languages. So that's why there are different languages all over the world now. And the people could not communicate to build. So what did they do? They broke up, and the people with one language went one direction, the people with another language went in another direction, and so forth until they all spread out, just as God wanted them to do. So that chapter is about the Tower of Babel, and it also has the generations then from Noah to Abraham. Chapters 12 through 25 have a really key character called Abraham. And we like to call him Father Abraham, don't we? Abraham was what we like to call the father of the faithful. God called him when he was in a town called Ur. U-R. Can you believe that? A town called Ur. And I'm going to go ahead and get our map out right now, because here's your map, and Ur is way over here, and it's between these two rivers. Actually, there are more than those rivers, but these two big rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, which are still there today. So we kind of know where Ur was. It was in this region right here. But this Tigris and Euphrates, actually, we think Eden, the Garden of Eden, was somewhere right in here, because the Genesis, when it talks about the Garden of Eden, it talks about those rivers there that flowed through it. So, but anyway, Abraham was in Ur. God called him to leave Ur and take his family and go to a promised land, go to a land that God would show him. He didn't even tell him where it was. He just said, I'll lead you there. That took a lot of faith in Abraham, didn't it? to go and not even know where he was going. But then Abraham had a son named Isaac, and then Isaac had a son named Jacob. Isaac's story is in chapters 25 through 28, and Jacob's story is in chapters 29 through 36, and Joseph, Jacob's son, his story is in chapters 37 to 50. Now, between that time, there's a lot that takes place. Abraham left Ur, and he traveled up to Haran and stayed there for a time, but God told him, no, this is not the place where you need to be. You need to go farther. So his father died there, Terah, and they traveled down to Canaan, and here's Canaan right here, and right there, right in that region right there is the Jordan River. It's between the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee down here. Those look really tiny, but on the map they are. But this is where they are, and this is the Mediterranean Sea right here. This over here is Egypt. All those rivers that come together there, that's Egypt. So Abraham eventually came all the way down here to Canaan. But what we want to talk about is Abraham and Sarah wanted a child. They wanted one so bad. And God had told them that they were going to have a child, and that child was going to have many children. In fact, Abraham's descendants were going to be so many, they were going to be like the sand on the seashore. You can't count sand, can you? The grains of sand. And God said, you're not going to be able to count how many sons you have, Abraham. Sons and grandsons and great-grandsons. You're not going to be able to count them. So they knew that it was coming, but they got frustrated. So Abraham, even though God told him he was going to have a son, he listened to Sarah. Sarah said, why don't you take my handmaid and have a son with her? And so Abraham did that. And the son he had was called Ishmael. And Ishmael was a good child, but he was not the promised child. And God told him that. He's not the promised child. And then God came to him one day in the evening in the outdoor setting in their tents. By the way, Abraham always lived in a tent. He never had a brick house. Always lived in a tent. Isn't that something? But he and Sarah were in their tent, and a man came and sat down with him and talked to him. It really was the angel of the Lord, and I believe that was Jesus, talking to him and telling him that he and Sarah were going to have a son, and they were going to have it the next year. In 1 year, you're going to have a son. Sarah was in the tent and heard it, and guess what she did? She laughed. She thought that was funny. But at one point, Abraham laughed too, but Sarah laughed. Well, a few minutes later, that angel talked to Sarah and said, why did you laugh when I said that you were going to have a son? And she said, oh, she got scared. And she said, I didn't laugh. Oh, but she did laugh, didn't she? Oops, she shouldn't have said that. But the angel said, oh, but you did laugh. And so what did they call his name? That son that was going to come, they called Laughter. And Laughter is the name Isaac. Isaac means laughter. So isn't that funny? I think that's just so funny. So Abraham and Sarah had that son the next year, and Ishmael was about 12, 14 years older than Isaac. And anyway, the Isaac was the son of promise. And of course, then we had just what happened about the offering Isaac, on the hill, in which that didn't take place. But Abraham wanted a wife for Isaac. Sarah had died, and which left Isaac just so heartbroken. His mother had died, and Abraham sent his trusted servant Eleazar up to a country where Sarah's family was, and said, "Find a wife for Isaac." And there he found a woman named Rebekah, and he brought Rebekah back, and Rebekah became Isaac's wife. And Isaac then had, and Rebekah had two sons, and they were twins. They were called Jacob and Esau, and they were totally different. You know, twins sometimes are alike. They look alike, and they act alike, and think alike. Not these two. One, Isaac was, he was a homebody. He liked being in the house. He liked to cook. He liked to do things, you know, with his mother. And Esau, oh, he was an outdoorsman. He liked to hunt and be outside and be out in the wilderness and enjoy, you know, taking on nature and taking on that bear or that deer or whatever. So he was a man's kind of man. But anyway, when it came time for God, for Jacob to give a blessing to the child that would actually rule, who would reign over the other one, it came down to the fact that Esau had sold his birthright to Isaac earlier, and then Jacob tricked Isaac into giving him the blessing. Rebekah and Jacob really got their heads together and found a way that they could trick Jacob into blessing Isaac. They could trick Isaac into blessing Jacob instead of Esau. I'll get it right. So he blessed Jacob. And then, Esau got really mad. He said, "You've taken my birthright, and now you've taken the blessing that was mine because I was the firstborn, and you were the second. I should belong to me." And Rebekah heard him say, she overheard him say that if he got a chance, he was going to kill him for doing that. So she got with Isaac and said, "We need to send Jacob away." So Jacob was sent far away to some of Rebekah's family, and then when he was away for many years, he married two women. He married Rachel and Leah, and that's a really long story that we don't have time for, but he had a lot of children by those two women. So his story is in chapters 29 through 36. He had 12 sons, and he had one daughter, just one daughter. Bless her heart, she was alone. But one of the youngest sons, not the youngest son, but one of the youngest sons was named Joseph, and he was an absolute favorite of Jacob. Jacob loved him. Oh me, he loved him so much. And somewhere along the way, God changed Jacob's name to Israel, and so that's where we get the name, the 12 tribes of Israel. They are the 12 sons of Jacob, but they are the 12 tribes of Israel. So the last chapters, 37 through 50, that's a lot of chapters, are about that younger son, Joseph, how that the brothers got really jealous of Joseph, and how his dad played favorites and liked him more than he liked the other boys. And he gave Joseph a coat of many colors. He didn't give them anything like that. So they were upset with Joseph. They didn't like it. In fact, they hated him. And when they caught him alone, when he was checking on them out way away from home. The father had sent him out to check on the brothers, which was something good. But while they had him out there alone, they threw him into a pit, and they were just going to leave him there to die. And one of the brothers said, "Oh, here comes a caravan of traders going to Egypt. Why don't we just sell him and make some money?" And that's what they did. They sold him to that caravan, and those people took him down to Egypt and sold him as a slave. And the next few years, quite a few years, Joseph spent in Egypt. First as a slave of a man named Potiphar. And there in Potiphar's house, he was blessed, and God blessed him. Potiphar gave him more and more responsibility until finally Joseph was in charge of everything in his house, until Mrs. Potiphar told a lie about Joseph and got him in trouble, big trouble. And Potiphar got mad at Joseph. He believed his wife, even though she had told a lie. He believed her, and he threw Joseph in prison. Well, even in prison, God blessed Joseph. The people, the security guards, the soldiers that were watching him could see that he was an innocent person. He was a good man, and they gave him favors. They did things for him. And one day, there were two men who were thrown into prison, a butler and a baker, and they were the butler and baker of the Pharaoh, of the king. And they were charged with one of them having tried to kill the king. But they didn't know who, so they threw both of them in prison. So they both had dreams that night, and they didn't know what they meant. So they came to Joseph, because they knew Joseph was a dreamer, and he could understand dreams and tell what dreams meant. And Joseph told them what their dreams meant. He said, the butler, you're going to be restored to your position because you're the innocent one. But he told the baker, he said, you're going to get your head chopped off and the birds are going to eat. And that's exactly what took place. And Joseph asked the butler, he said, when you're restored to your position and when you're there and next to the Pharaoh, tell him about me. Tell him that I'm here and I'm innocent. But the butler got back, and for 2 whole years, he forgot about Joseph. How could he do that? But he did. He forgot about Joseph. And finally, he said the Pharaoh had some dreams, some really eerie, spooky dreams. And none of his dream wise men could figure out what they were about. So finally, the butler remembered, hey, I remember Joseph and how he interpreted our dreams, and they came true. So he told the king, there's a man in prison, and he can tell you what your dreams mean. So they went and got Joseph. Joseph told the Pharaoh what that was going to be about. He told him that for 7 years there's going to be plenty of food in the land. And then after that, there's going to be 7 years when people are going to starve. There's not going to be any food. And Joseph said, you need to put somebody in charge right now at the beginning of this 7 years of plenty and have them store up as much grain and food as they can and put it in warehouses and save it up, so that when those 7 years of famine come, when there's no food, you can give the people food from those big warehouses, and that people won't starve to death. So the Pharaoh could see the wisdom in that, and he said, I can't find anyone more wise to do that job than you, Joseph, and I'm going to put you in charge. And Joseph became the highest person in command in Egypt, next to just under the king. Everything else was in 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 Joseph's control. The king had his wife and his family, and Joseph was in control of everything else. That's amazing, isn't it? From going to being sold from a pit to being the ruler, the next in line to the ruler in Egypt. During that time, when he was doing that, during the famine time, his family, Jacob and the sons that were left, the 11 sons that were left there, they were in the midst of the famine too, just like everybody else, because they were in the famine years, that second 7 years of famine, and they were hungry. And Jacob said, I hear that there's grain for sale in Egypt. Go down there and buy some of that grain. So the brothers went down, and they had plenty of money, and needless to say, they went back and forth, and Joseph recognized them as his brothers. They could not recognize him because he looked like an Egyptian. He had the Egyptian clothes and the Egyptian hair and all of the... He didn't look like Joseph, the Joseph they knew, but he recognized them. And he wanted to know if they had changed. Were they still the ugly, mean people that he knew that had sold him into slavery? Well, he did some tests on them, and he figured out finally that they were very sorry about what they had done. And so he invited them to a banquet, and at that banquet they had his younger brother with them, his younger brother Benjamin, and Joseph saw Benjamin for the first time, and he was just choked up because he hadn't seen his younger brother in so many years. But he revealed to all of those 11 brothers that he was Joseph. And they were shocked. And they first thought, is he going to get mad and do something horrible to us because we did something horrible to him? And they asked him, and he said, no. He said, I'm going to take care of you. Go back and bring your father. I want to see him. Go back and bring him, and I'll have a place for you here in our family in Egypt, and you'll be safe and you'll be fed. You will not starve to death. So that's exactly what happened. Jacob and the brothers all moved to Egypt. Joseph gave them the land called Goshen, a part of Egypt called Goshen, where they could feed their sheep, and it was really luscious grass and everything. Not every part of Egypt is that way. Parts of Egypt are dry, but that part had a lot of grass, and they could feed their sheep. And Joseph was able to see his father again, and Jacob was able to see. Jacob didn't know that his son had been alive all those years. All those years he thought that his son had been killed by a bad animal, a wild animal. But now he saw that he was alive. And they lived for that long period of time until finally there was a ruler that rose up that did not know Joseph. But that Joseph getting to the end of his life ends the book of Genesis. And so the 50 chapters of Genesis ends with the end of Joseph's life, and his people, the Israelites, living there as guests in the land of Egypt. But in Exodus, the next book, things change dramatically. So what we want to do is, we've already talked about the map a little bit. We'll finish up real quick with the questions that were at the end of the lesson. I think I gave you the questions sheet. Let me find mine real quick, and I'll give you the answers if you don't have them. Here they are. The first one, number 1, Genesis means beginning. Number 2, Genesis covers 2,500 years. Number 3, Genesis has 50 chapters. Number 4, the author of Genesis is Moses. Number 5, Genesis begins with the creation of the heavens and the earth and continues with the beginning of the following: the things in heaven, the heavens, planets, birds, all the other stuff that's in the heavens. And next, things on the earth, the animals, the birds, the fish, and all the other things that are on the earth. And then man and woman. And really, basically everything. Everything else. Number 6, what is the red ribbon that begins in Genesis 3? That red ribbon is the blood of Christ. It's that promise that God is going to bring his Son and offer his Son and be able to give us salvation through him. Number 7, the main characters of Genesis are Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And number 8, this is easy. Who built the ark? Noah did. And who were Noah's sons? Well, they were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Number 10, who were Abraham's first 2 sons? They were Ishmael and Isaac. And number 11, who was Isaac's wife? She was Rebekah. Number 12, who was Esau's brother? That was Jacob. And then who had 12 sons? That was Jacob too. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I have enjoyed it so much, and I hope we'll get together again. I believe Miss Hannah is teaching the next lesson on Wednesday night, and she'll continue with Exodus. We're teaching the same material, so she'll teach the next lesson, and then I'll follow her, and we'll just go continually through our 4,000 years in 13 weeks. It's great to be with you. Bye.